raise hand function as I will moderate it and call on people. You do not have to announce yourself. We know you guys pretty well. And with that, I will open it up to Eric.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. We're excited to be at this stage of the draft process. It's a big off season, as we've talked about. We concluded our final set of draft meetings on Saturday morning. We have approximately 200 players ranked on the draft board as draftable prospects, which is a very strong, healthy number. Excited about the opportunity that lies ahead of us, and very appreciative for all the work that the coaches and scouts have done to build the best draft board we can build. We'll take questions.
Jamison Hensley.
Hey, Eric, with Orlando Brown, what do you figure about the chances, or how can you gauge the chances of possibly granting his trade request either the days leading up to the draft or the day of the draft? And also, can you confirm there was a report of the free agent's visit for Villanueva? Can you confirm his visit as well? Thanks.
Well, that's a really hard question for me to answer, Jamison, because I really can't answer that question. I'm not going to talk about any, ongoing discussions with Orlando or whatever that might be. There's always a lot of moving parts in any offseason. We're just getting ready for the draft, and we're basically just approaching this as how can we build the best possible team to play in September. And I'm also not going to comment on any, reports of players visiting or not visiting Baltimore. Again, it doesn't really benefit us to talk about those kind of things, especially this time of year. So I'll just leave that question alone.
Hey, Eric, this is affectionately, of course, called the Liar's Lunch, and this year without the lunch. As you go over the years, is there a particular ruse or misdirection, something that worked out that you're fond of, either from you or Ozzy or something over the years? Maybe if you want to go back a little further so it's not quite as contemporary, but has this been effective in that regard in using this press conference to help you?
Oh man, well if I comment on any past, subterfuge or ruses that we might have used, then I might not have the opportunity to do those same maneuvers again, Pete. I think just, one of the things that we've always tried to do over the years is prevent the list of players that visit us to get out publicly. So, and some of you guys were very good at getting those names over the years. So what we try to do sometimes is just bring in players that we really have no, interest in, just to get their names out there, get them attached to us. There was, going back to, I think I can tell this story, Lamar Jackson. We were certainly very interested in Lamar, and it was important for us to get him here to spend a day with us. But it was also really important for us to not get that name out there. So it helped when Lamar came out because he didn't have an agent. So when agents aren't involved, it's much easier to keep secrets. That's one thing we've learned over the last 25 years. So even though people were trying to find out if Lamar Jackson visited us, we were able to keep that very, very quiet. And, I was proud of that. It's very hard, as a coach would say, to actually have secrets in this business, especially, if more than one person knows. But that was an instance where it was really beneficial to us to keep that quiet, and we were able to do that.
Hey, Eric. When you look at the pass rusher, you got hit on over your history. You guys hit on your first round picks, Suggs and Boulware, but you also found some talent in the later rounds with Darius Thomas was a 6th round, Jared Johnson 4th round, Judon a 5th round pick. Is this the type of draft where you see depth at pass rusher, or is this kind of draft where you think it's going to be top heavy in finding a guy?
Well, it's a strong draft, I think, with edge pass rushers across the board, basically in any round. So there's certainly some players that we like at the top of the board in the 1st round, 2nd round. But as we look at the depth of the draft, we see really good players at that position, outside linebackers scattered throughout. And I think one of the things that really benefits us is I think our coaches and scouts are very aligned on the type of qualities that we want at that position. And, I think we've been blessed to have been in the same scheme, although the scheme has changed slightly over the years. We know what an outside linebacker looks like, and I think our coaches do a great job of developing those type of players. So that really helps us, I think, in the draft. We've been fortunate over the years to find some players that we were probably able to get at a really good spot that presented very good value to us long term.
Eric Coleman.
Hey, Eric. since the season ended, you guys have made some additions. You've lost some players. Do you feel like you're a better team now than you were when the season ended, or how much work do you think is needed? Particularly, I know you signed Sammy Watkins and brought in re-signed Tyus and tried to improve the pass rush. But again, how much work is needed ahead?
Well, Jerry, there's a lot of work to be done. I mean, we always feel that way. We wouldn't be in this business if we felt complacent, So we look at this as a great opportunity with the draft. We've got some picks and ability to add some really good players to the mix, guys that should come in immediately and contribute. We also see opportunities between now and September to possibly add some veteran players. There is still some unrestricted free agents on the market, some players that will possibly be post-June 1st cuts that we can look at as well, and there's always going to be trade opportunities as well. So a lot of different ways to add players to the team. We're going to build the best team we can in September so that coach and all the coaches and players have the best possible chance to win games in September.
Cliff Brown.
Yeah, for either Eric or Joe, two questions. One, do you think this draft is a lot more or somewhat more unpredictable because of all the COVID factors? I hear or read some people saying that around the league. And number two, there's two wide receivers you guys have been linked to a lot, Marshall and Bateman. If you can talk about both of those guys as far as their similarities or differences.
All right. In terms of the COVID, yeah, it's a little unique this year in terms of scouting the players. Our guys did a lot of it through Zoom during the fall. We're able to go out to games once the league opened that up, and so we got a chance to see them play games live. And then obviously it loosened up this spring. We were able to get to campuses and work guys out and put our hands on players, so to speak, to see them up front and in person live. As Coach says all the time, could you feel the speed of a player? Could you feel the power? Our guys were there to see that and get that exposure. So, it feels very similar to a normal year, just being exposed to them through pro days and the Senior Bowl as well. In terms of Bateman and Marshall, both talented guys who have some versatility. Marshall has played outside and then moved inside. Bateman did the same thing in each of the past 2 years. So they've showed off their ability to play from different spots of the offense. Both talented guys. A little different at what they do best, but certainly two guys that we have our eye on.
Jerry Sandusky.
This is for Eric. This is your first year going into the new era of 17 regular season games. Does that change at all the way you look at your board, the way you think about the draft in terms of what you think you'll need for what a regular season is going to look like now?
I hadn't thought about that too much, Jerry. I think what we learned from this past year was the value of the practice squad. We were able to have a bigger practice squad this year, and it really helped. And I thought that the scouts, the pro guys, George and all the guys upstairs, and also our coaches did a great job with the practice squad, developing those guys, getting them in, each week, learning the scheme, helping to service both sides of the ball, and then finding some good young players that we could develop, and then also looking at, maybe some veteran players that were still out there available that we could bring in. That gave us a boost at different points throughout the season on special teams or on offense or defense. So I think in a long season, which we saw that this past season was a very long season, having as many good young players that have experience is a really beneficial thing, and we'll continue to do that.
We know that you draft well around here, Eric and Joe and John. But when the New York Post says that the Ravens are the best drafting team over the last 5 years, is there anything you can use from that? Can you do agents tell their clients, they draft well, so they're looking at you, so that's a positive? Anything you can take from that?
I think we've probably had the most picks over that span. And I look at the draft as in many ways, I have to say it's a luck-driven process. If you have more picks, you're going to hit on more good players. And that goes back to a philosophy that I think Ozzie started back in 1996. We started really going after comp picks and trying to trade back as much as we could in any given round. So, yeah, we've had some success. We've also had some big misses. We've had a lot of picks, and I think that's the number one indicator to see teams that have success in the draft is how many chances they have to draft good players. And then that, and also having, the development machine, having the coaching staff, the strength and conditioning people, the wellness people, getting these good young players in here and giving them a chance to get better, and that's what it's all about.
Ryan Mink.
Yeah, Eric, I was just wondering whether how much the opt-outs influence kind of how you look at a player. Obviously, it's unique circumstances over the past year. Does that influence this year's draft class and individual prospects?
That's a good question, and it's a hard question to answer. I think everybody that evaluates players has a different way of looking at the opt-out players. There's always a little bit with me anxiety, because what if the guy didn't play this year? What's he going to look like, next year? There have been some players that haven't played a football game in 400 or 500 days in college, and it makes you nervous. On the other hand, we've seen, many times players in our program that might have gotten hurt, missed the majority of a season, came back the next year and played very well. So it's a nuanced thing. I think it depends on the player himself. It depends on his personality, his drivers and all those different things. It depends on what he's been doing over the last year. It depends on maybe the program he came out of, the position he played. I mean, there's so many different factors. It is a challenge, but it's not something that we haven't thought about. We've been thinking about this since really last May, what would happen in a situation like this with a pandemic. So I'm proud of the fact that the scouts and coaches, we were able to come up with a plan of looking at players and evaluating players and going to visit players and all these different things without a combine. Unique challenges for sure, but I think we've had a good plan, and I think we'll be ready in the next 10 days.
Jeff Zrebeck.
John, you guys, you and Eric were quite clear early in the offseason that the offensive line was definitely something you wanted to focus on. You came out and signed Kevin Zeitler early as a big addition. Where are you in the process of upgrading that group? And at this point, can you give us an idea of how you see Bradley Bozeman fitting in terms of position?
Right. Well, the good thing about Bradley, just starting with that, is he's versatile. He could play left guard, or for us, center. He played center at Alabama, so he's in. I'd say he's in the conversation for both those two spots. He's proven himself as a starter, and we're excited about him. As far as where we're at, we're in process. We've got the draft. We've got still free agent possibilities. That question was asked earlier, and guys are competing. We've got guys that'll be fighting for those jobs. So we'll see how all that comes together for us. I'm very confident we're going to have a great offensive line next year.
Bobby Trosted.
Hey, this question's for Eric. When it comes to drafting for best available as opposed to need, quote unquote, how would you describe your philosophy as you've come to understand it during your time in Baltimore throughout your career?
Oh man, this question, I could talk about this question for 5 hours. Basically all we do is we evaluate the players, and we really try to stack the players best over next best, over next best, all the way down the board. That's the key. The key is really the comparison of the players, looking at their strengths and weaknesses, how they fit with, scheme, how they fit our culture, which is unique here. We look at all the personality quirks and the drivers and the motivations and the grit and all those different things. And it's really like a big mosaic. It all kind of just fits. And then what we do is we look at the strengths and weaknesses of the team. We've got some positions that are probably pretty stacked. Really a lot of talent on this team. We've got other positions that are talented, but we need depth. We have other positions where there may be a hole at some point. So we factor that in. Now, what we're not going to do is pass up an elite player or a highly skilled player at a position if we think that guy can upgrade us over time. And what we've seen, we see this every single year, and this is an important point. As you assess the strengths and weaknesses of your team, it can change. It can change overnight. It's a very fluid process. You go out one day thinking you're stacked at tight end, and then all of a sudden, Nick Boyle gets hurt. And then you're trying to find tight ends. You think you've got 5 or 6 corners deep, and then all of a sudden you lose corners in a minicamp practice, or you lose corners in a preseason game, or you lose 2 corners in 1 week. One guy pulls a hamstring and the other guy rolls an ankle, and the next thing you know, you're trying to find corners on other teams. So the idea of strengths and weaknesses on your team and, needs and all those different things is very, very fluid, and it can change very quickly. So what we try to do is every single player that we add to this team, we ask ourselves, can this guy play winning football? And if he can, and if he's motivated, and if he can fit this culture, then we'll consider that player very strongly, regardless of need or not need at any given time.
Mark Viviano.
Hey, John. Eric is going to pick these players and you're going to coach them. What is your understanding as to how available they will be to you once they are drafted in terms of on-field, and your reaction to the players saying they will not participate in the voluntary workouts?
Yeah, I mean, we're coaches. We coach. That's what we're preparing to do. We love our players and we love to teach. We work together with any player, every player that chooses to be here, to help in every way we can, individually, collectively, as a team, help them build their game and achieve their goals, their dreams as football players. So that's how we look at it as coaches. Pretty simple.
Aaron Downing.
This question is for Eric. You talked a little bit earlier about the value in having a lot of picks. As you look at this draft in terms of the number of picks that you have, is that where you want to be? Do you want to try to add picks? How do you view that?
Well, we've been in the pick business for years. I think, if your team is strong, or if you think you have a pretty good roster, then it's tougher for guys to make the team. So you don't want to have 15 picks or 13 picks or 12 picks every year, but this is a good draft. We see a lot of talented players at the starter level potentially. So if we have the chance to get a pick or two extra, then we'll probably do that. We don't necessarily want to have 11 or 12 picks this year, but there is a sweet spot. And I think like just looking out next year, we think we'll have a chance to have some additional picks. So the idea is to always have some surplus picks in your back pocket that you can use. And so I think we see the opportunity over the next couple of years to, probably draft somewhere around 20 players. We like that number. It keeps us, I think, young, but also experienced across the roster, and that should give us a chance to compete long term.
Sean Stettner.
Hey, Eric. Where do things stand regarding a contract extension for Lamar?
That's ongoing. That's definitely a fluid thing. Lamar and I have had a discussion about that. I think it's important to us and it's important to him. I think Lamar is obviously a very patient guy. He wants to be the best he can be. He wants this team to be the best it can be, and he wants to win very badly. So we're aligned that way. I'm confident that we'll continue to discuss this, and I think at some point, hopefully, we'll have some good news for everybody.
Charles Walker.
Yeah, hey Eric. You've talked about the value of having volume of picks in several different ways. Given that, when you're looking at this year's draft, what do you think are the deepest positions?
Well, I think quarterback is a good position. I think you've got 5 or 6 strong guys that can come in and really have a chance to compete to be your quarterback of the future for sure. Offensive line, I think, is a strong position this year. You've got tackles, you've got guards, you've got some centers in the first couple of rounds, guys that can come in and really impact your team. Edge pass rush, we've talked about that a little bit. We see, probably somewhere between 5 to 8 guys in the first couple of rounds that would have a chance to come in and really be legitimate edge setter, pass rusher type of guys that can do a multiple of different things for you. And then wide receiver, that was a strong position last year. I think it's a strong position this year. And you've got a bunch of guys in the first 3 rounds that really can come in and compete to be significant players for you early on.
Aditi?
Hi, I know that you talked about the guys, this is probably for Eric and Joe, you talked about the guys that opted out and how each person is different to evaluate. Having said that, is there a position that is easier to come off of after some time off? Is a position that's easier to evaluate? A lot of the top offensive linemen haven't played in a year. Are there any nuances to what positions are better?
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, in terms of whether they've played or not, I don't know if it makes it, easier. Obviously, on an offensive lineman and a DD, you can see them play every rep in their college tape. So if they didn't play as much, or if they didn't play this year, if they opted out of their school, didn't play as many games, certainly going back to 19 tape and being able to see them play every rep helps. Some of those players that did opt out showed up at the Senior Bowl. Others didn't, so we had a late look at them. But certainly the positions where, wide receivers, DBs, if they opted out, you had to search. You maybe had to watch more film, but the great thing is on a lot of those players, you had 19 and 18, albeit you're looking at a player when he's much younger, but you're able to go back and see him move around and assess the athlete. And then there's a little bit of a projection of where he is that we're able to kind of to answer a little bit when we showed up at the pro days this spring.
This is for Eric. Eric, as you guys plan a future with Lamar together, obviously it is a significant financial commitment, more than what you've had to pay for a rookie contract. Just how does having a quarterback like that potentially lock down, change your team building process, especially as it pertains to the draft?
I mean, it's great to have a QB. I mean, it's great to have a QB that wants to win badly, and he prepares to win, and he cares, and he's a part of this community. I mean, that's a really important thing. We don't take that for granted. We try to be as strategic as possible in the short term, but also the long term. I think Pat Moriarty and Nick Matteo do an awesome job looking at the salary cap and the implications of deals that we make. We try to be responsible in the short term. We try to be aggressive as well. We've tried to be proactive, as I think you've seen in the last few years, with contracts, with veteran players, with guys that we've drafted and developed. We've tried to keep as many of those guys as possible. We understand that if we do sign a long-term deal with Lamar Jackson, that's going to change the way we've operated the last couple of years, and we certainly understand that, and we look at that as a great problem to have. We aspire to that type of problem. We want to have the franchise quarterback. We want to have the quarterback that cares as much as we do, and he's a leader, and he's the face of the team, and he represents the team as well as he does, and he gives us a chance to win every game. So that's a positive. It will change the way that we do contracts, potentially. We will have to be probably a little bit more careful about which players we sign and which players we don't sign. We may lose some good young players, and that's unfortunately just the salary cap age that we're in, and it happens to every single team. So we'll be aggressive if possible. I think the draft will continue and will always remain the lifeblood of this organization when it comes to building the team and building the roster, and draft picks will be more important than ever.
Dan?
Was that Stan?
Yes, Stan Charles.
I apologize, I didn't hear. Eric, I'm asking you to go on a little bit of the Wayback Machine. When you and Ozzie chose Bradley Bozeman, did you pick him at that time because of his versatility, or did you think he was capable of being an NFL center?
Well, I mean, he was a center at Alabama, Stan, so that was his position. We drafted him as a center, quite honestly, because that's the position that he played at Alabama. He came in, and we had a center. We liked our depth at center, and Bradley, to his credit, really came in right away, and he played well. He's a smart guy. He's pretty versatile. He's strong, and he's tough. He's a very diligent player, so he just adapted to that left guard spot pretty well, surprisingly, at an early age, and we were very happy with that. And now we'll assess where we are as an offensive line and make the best decision moving forward as to where Bradley will play next year.
Jones? Luke?
Eric, when you look at the defensive line, how do you prioritize adding some more youth, considering some of the age that you have there, and really even just the contract status? A lot of those guys are unsigned after this year.
Well, we drafted a couple guys last year. We're very happy that we did. We'll always look at the defensive line as being very important, especially in our defense and our scheme. Stopping the run is always a priority for us. We were very happy last year with the additions of the guys we brought in across the board, the veteran players we brought in, the younger players. So Again, one of the jobs as a general manager and one of the jobs that I have with John is we always look at the short term of the team and also the long term of the team. So you're right. I mean, we've got some players that have 1-year deals or 2-year deals. We've got some younger players, and so we'll just continue to assess the strength of the draft. And if, quite honestly, if the best guy available at the time is a defensive lineman, then we'll pick him. And if he's not, we'll pick somebody else.
Ryan Mick.
Kind of a similar question to Eric. How do you evaluate the need at safety? Obviously, you have two proven starters who played well last year, but kind of the depth need there at safety. And then also one for Joe. You know, we've heard a lot of talk about this wide receiver class, and Eric, you kind of addressed it. Others have said it's the best wide receiver class they've seen in a long time. Do you feel the same way, Joe? How deep is this class?
Well, the safety question.
And I would say, again, Deshaun came in last year. He stayed healthy and he played great football. Chuck Clark is in many ways the heart and soul of our defense. So we love those two young players. They're good players. Could we use some depth? Of course. We could use depth at every other position as well. But again, not to beat a dead horse. If there's a really good safety there, we'll pick them. Because in our scheme with Wink, the way that we, have players on and off the field, interchangeable, we want good players. And if we can bring in a safety who's a young, ascending player who gives us a chance long term, then we'll do that, because you just, in this business, as I said, you can be as strong as possible and then you get a couple injuries and things change overnight. So for us, having depth at every single position is essential.
Eric and Joe, when you look at the drafting of players, especially Pro Bowl players, the Ravens rank among the best in the NFL. But one of the questions I get from fans all the time is, for the wide receiver position, you've been able to draft Pro Bowl players at every single position? What is it about the wide receiver position that you have not been able to do so? And is that something you guys even think about?
I mean, do we think about it? I mean, I guess we think about it, but we want to win games. I mean, that's really what I think about more often is why did we lose the game or why did we win the game? So we want to have good players at every position. I'm aware that there's some fan discontent with our wide receivers and our drafting and all that. I mean, but in general, I look at our record and how we win games and how we play football, and I'm proud of the team. I know Coach is proud. I know Joe is proud. So we've got some really good young receivers. It's insulting to these guys when they hear that we don't have any receivers. It's quite insulting. I'm insulted by it too, to be honest. So I think we've got some guys that want to show everybody what they can do. We love our team. We love our roster. We've got a lot of really good young football players who care very badly about it. So I can't answer the question about Pro Bowlers and all that. I mean, if Pro Bowlers get voted Pro Bowlers, they're Pro Bowlers. But I think we've had a lot of good receivers here over the years that have won big games for us. And I know this. I think Lamar likes our receivers. I think our coaches like our receivers. I think the teammates, the guys in this team, like our receivers. And that's my answer to that question.
I have to apologize. I jumped the gun on Joe. If we could go back to Joe Hortiz to address the college.
Yeah, to Ryan's
Yeah, I echo what Eric says about the Pro Bowlers. I mean, it's neat and all that, but it's about winning, and that's what we care about when we pick players that fit the Ravens. In terms of the wideouts, Ryan, it is a deep class, and last year was a deep class, and I think next year is going to be a deep class. There's more and more players coming out of that position that are developed, and the way the college game's going, I think we're going to continue to see it. It's a unique class because there's versatility in the class. There's a lot of outside guys. There's a ton of slot players, and like Eric mentioned earlier, there's value throughout the draft. Our board is stacked throughout. It's not a couple high guys and then a gap. There's a nice column with a lot of names in it. So it's exciting as a scout to look up there and say, hey, if we have an opportunity to take a guy high, it's going to be awesome. There's going to be a guy we like, but there's also going to be an opportunity in those middle rounds, much like there was last year for us to take players that we like. So, it's nice to go into a draft knowing that throughout the draft there's going to be options for us.
Biff?
Yeah, Eric or Joe, if either of you could address specifically Terrace Marshall at LSU, what you've seen from him in terms of scouting him, and a unique prospect maybe in Jake Funk at the University of Maryland.
All right, we'll start with the local guy, Jake. He's competitive as can be. The neat thing about him is he's, one, certainly been a productive runner there for him at Maryland, but two, he's been an outstanding special teamer, which we like in prospects. And so I think having that versatility is something that's very attractive to him. That'll be seen throughout the league, not just in Baltimore. In terms of Terrace, he's a guy that played outside last year, showed his explosiveness as an outside receiver, and took on a greater role this year in the slot. So he's shown that versatility. He's shown the ability to win at all three levels, and he's got great size and speed. So a player that obviously throughout his career has shown the ability to produce from different platforms of an offense.
Childs?
Yeah, for Joe, I'm wondering if you could give us your evaluations on a couple of the pass rushers who are being talked about toward the end of the first round. Jalen Phillips from Miami, Ojulari from Georgia, and then Jason Owe from Penn State.
Should I read my reports, or do I, no, they're all good players. There's no doubt. There's a reason they're being talked about high. They're certainly each different. Phillips is a guy that, obviously transferred in from UCLA to Miami back home and has had really an outstanding season this year. Sack production, plays really hard. Ojulari is versatile, does a lot of things in that Georgia defense. And I missed who else you asked about?
Owe from Penn State.
Oh, yeah, a guy who's obviously close by, came in, developmental player early on, has taken on a greater role this year and shown the ability to be a three-down player there at Penn State this year. He was used more as a situational guy in 19 and really took on a great role this year. And another guy who plays hard. All three of those guys, I can promise you one thing. When you put on the tape, you're going to see competitive players that fit the Ravens style of football.
Jerry Sandusky?
This is for John. Coach, obviously we've talked about the draft because it's front and center at the moment, but historically it's year 2 and beyond that players have their biggest impact in the NFL. You had a really productive 10-player draft class last year. As you look at last year's draft class, what are you most excited about their impact this year?
I'm excited about all of them. I'm most excited about each guy individually. I couldn't separate one guy from the other. All those guys are great people. They work hard. They have dreams. We talk about their goals all the time, and I just can't wait to see how they pop. What kind of progress they make between then and now. So just can't wait. It's exciting to coach those guys, and I think we're going to see big things from all of them. What degree, who, how, what, who I'm most excited about, it'd be impossible to say, but I'm very excited. We all are as coaches. Eric, Joe. When you draft a guy and you start coaching guys, you want them to do well, and you can't wait to see them, get at it.
Nestor?
Needs to unmute. This is for Eric, I guess, and coach as well. Just on the wide receiver, back to that conversation in regard to expectations from the room. And when you get together at this point and try to draft a wide receiver, I'm assuming given your offense, it's a different kind of wide receiver than maybe you were looking at 5 or 10 or 20 years ago, or all the totality of whatever fan angst there would be. But when you talk about it privately, the level for your room, knowing how much you run the football, what are you really expecting out of the wide receivers in totality?
I'll let John answer that question.
Thanks. It was vague enough to try to make it just tough enough to answer. We want winning football from our guys, Nestor. It's guys who fit what we do, certainly, but we want guys who can get open, who can make plays, that play hard. There's different aspects to different types of receivers, but in the end, I think we'll find certain receivers in the draft that we like, that fit us, fit our needs, fit how we play, fit our quarterback, and fit our personality, as Eric said, our culture. We'll find those guys and we'll be targeting those guys. We know who they are already. We've had the meetings, and we'll be trying to get them. So the same thing with the guys who are already here. Like Eric said, I agree with Eric 100%. I think he couldn't have been said any better than what he said. So we'll stand by our guys. I'm not about to apologize for our guys. Our guys are going to go out there and win football games for us, and they're going to make plays, and they're going to show people. Can't wait to see it happen.
Sean Stettner?
Yeah, I guess this is for
Eric or John, but just wondering about draft night. Are you guys, I assume, planning a more traditional draft night, war room at the castle? We all know how everything was affected last year for the draft. And, if so, everything's back to quote unquote normal. I would assume that you guys are happy about that, all being back together for draft night.
I have a question for Eric on that. Are we going to have the ice cream bars again this year?
I hope we
I
do.
miss the ice cream bars.
I think there's just a few people that are disappointed this year, and it's Michael DeCosta and Jackson DeCosta, because they had a great draft last year, being a part of that at my house, and they love the food that was delivered, courtesy of Steve and John, I think. But they had a great draft last year, and we're going to be traditional this year. We have a setup. It's going to work out perfectly, very similar to what we've done in past years. We're not going to have the exact amount of access that we've had to the draft room, but we are very comfortable. It'll be a hybrid, meaning we'll have some technology that we'll use this year. We're not going to have anybody in Cleveland, but we learned last year how to make the picks. Using technology. We'll have some additional boards. I mean, one of the great things, probably the only great thing about this pandemic was it forced us last year to be creative and to step outside the box a little bit and do some things differently. And we're going to incorporate, even though we're getting hopefully back to more of a tradition and things that that we've all gotten accustomed to, we've learned how to do some amazing things, technology, the video guys, our IT people, David McDonald, they've helped us with the draft process. They helped us this season with what we did with meetings and different things. We're going to continue to do some of those things because they're smart, and it would be foolish for us to not do that. So it's going to be very similar in a lot of ways. There'll be some changes, and I think the changes will end up being very productive.
Aditi?
Coach Harbaugh, this one is for you. When you talk about the young receivers that you have, Prochet and Duvernay, they obviously missed all of spring football a year ago. They missed a fair amount of summer prep. So as we see players kind of wanting to opt out, can you just tell us why are OTAs so important? What happens in spring football that is so vital in the preparation of a team?
Yeah, I've been on record saying that already. It's football practice. It's a team game. It's the ultimate team game. And, since I've been in the league, in terms of the controversy about the whole thing, it's been voluntary. We coach every guy that wants to be here. Every coach that decides to show up will coach. And that's what we'll do. So I'm looking forward to it. And when they get here, we'll be coaching them. So that's kind of how it works out. And we've got guys in the building today. We've got rehab guys. We've got non-rehab guys here. So guys make their choices, and the guys who are here, we're coaching them up.
Garrett?
Hey, this question's for Eric. I'm just curious how the potential uncertainty around Orlando Brown and a potential trade there affects how you assess a need at offensive tackle as you go into this draft.
Well, it doesn't change things very much, Garrett. If you go back to the early, press conferences that John has had, and when I've spoken in this offseason, we've talked about the importance of the offensive line, and that's a constant. When you play the type of football that we play, offensive line is always going to be a priority for us. And so we want to build the best offensive line we can in the short term, in the long term, looking out, making sure that we have adequate depth at every single spot. So it doesn't change our thinking very much. If there's a really good player there, we're going to pick him. And that's going to give us the best chance to win. It's going to help our offense succeed, and it's going to make us a tough team to play against.
Jerry Coleman?
It's both Eric and John. Hopefully you guys have both been vaccinated, along with Joe and most people in the building. As far as the NFL's policy with vaccinations, yes, I just got my second one at M&T Bank Stadium on Saturday morning. The reaction was horrible, but I'm vaccinated. Nonetheless,
Are you back from the reaction? You're healthy now?
yes, I'm able to do my show tonight. I was down for 48 hours, but
Awesome.
you guys don't care about it. Nobody cares about that. I'm asking you.
Oh, we do.
About,
We care about you.
I know you do,
We
but
do,
I
Jerry.
appreciate that.
I mean, I do. I'm not sure about John. Do you care?
Yes,
Do you care
Jerry's
about
a
it?
friend. Jerry's a good friend. We've become
Okay,
friends.
well, do you care? Because he didn't
No,
necessarily
I mean,
say.
Jerry didn't seem like he cares about
Jerry
me.
doesn't care about Joe.
Hopefully, maybe Joe.
Maybe Joe, I mean, you know.
You guys gave me a few years ago either the worst or second worst draft grade for a media member.
Yeah.
How can I mean,
Yeah, that's
how much respect should I show you? I mean,
Holding
you
a
guys-
grudge there.
Well, that was primarily Joe, Jerry. I mean, I
Yeah.
talked to Joe about that. He did his assessment. He said reject.
Well, there were some character concerns, you know, and so we had to do a lot of due diligence, and you know, we've gotten more information, Jerry. We moved you up a little bit.
Well, maybe we can redraft in a few years. Nonetheless, with the vaccination and the players and trying to encourage them to get on board, is that really not your role? Is that the Players Association role? I know you want them all vaccinated so you can be around them and vice versa.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, you know, first of all, I think, you know, it's a vaccination is a very personal thing. You know, I'm not going to get into the politics of that. I have been vaccinated. I know John and Joe have been vaccinated as well. I think for me, it was the right thing to do. Our players have the right to make a decision that they feel is best for them. You know, there is a benefit to the club having as many people vaccinated as possible. We believe it's the best thing for our players and organization. But again, we support our players and their right to choose what they think is best for themselves, and we'll pivot accordingly.
Jonas?
Yes, this is for Joe. Joe, excuse me. I think over the past couple of years, especially on offense, you guys have, you know, in addition to selecting good players, you've made speed a priority. I know you've been in the scouting game for a while now. With the rise of, you know, things like the GPS trackers that you guys get from colleges, could you just talk about, you know, how your perspective on how to gauge speed and, you know, in-game acceleration, quickness, and all that stuff has kind of changed over the years, and what you guys now use to judge players in that particular lane?
Yeah, certainly we still use the stopwatch at pro days, but like you mentioned, you have the GPS data that we're able to get from schools, and there's other methods that we're able to use, and you use it to marry it to what you're seeing. And you know, obviously our scouts go into schools and they watch film, and when you put the film on, your eyes are telling you whether a player's fast or not, or whether you perceive him to be fast. But then you're able to take that data and that information and add it to the process, and you know, hopefully it marries up. And so we have a way of using it all together, and our analytics guys do a great job working their end, and our scouts obviously assess the speed category in their eyes. So kind of works together, and sometimes you have disconnects and sometimes you have the marriages, but it's great when you see it with your eyes and then the data backs it up.
Jameson?
Again, with Eric and Joe, not having the in-person interviews, I know how you guys really have a good strategy and how you ask certain questions, things like that. With having the Zoom interviews, are you still feel like you can get a good read on these players, or, you know, is there a challenge not having a guy that you're sitting face and face and really kind of getting a more in-person feel?
You know, we've interviewed so many players this year, Jameson, hundreds of players this year, and that's, again, one of the benefits of the pandemic was the technology associated with the Zoom and all that, and so it's given us a means to interview so many players. And without going into the specifics, we feel very confident. We feel very comfortable. We've had great access to these players. It's actually been, you know, I think one of the better aspects of the offseason this year, especially, is just being able to touch as many players as possible and really get an opportunity to talk to these players. Our coaches have used it as well, and it's been very beneficial to the process.
All right, we have time for two more. We'll do Jameson, and then I'm not sure if it's a smoking jacket or Carnegie, but that'll earn Ryan make the last question. Go ahead, Jeff.
Oh, sorry, you said Jameson. Eric, is it fair to say you guys won't be signing a true free agent until May 3rd at this point?
Might be.
Jameson and Jeff, did they both get a question, or is it just Jeff who gets the question, Chad?
Just Jeff.
I'm sorry, Jeff. Ask your
question again.
Sorry. I was asking about the timing. I know you guys are having some, you know, I'm not asking about specific players, but in terms of hold off until after May 3rd?
Your question broke up, but I think I understand your question. There's always, at this time of year, you've got to make decisions that are best for the club. And, if there's a great player that we think we have to sign right now, we'll certainly sign that player. The implications of that might be unknown. But in general, there's a strategy that we use. Every player is different. Every negotiation is different. Every value is different. We'll look at the strengths and weaknesses of any decision that we make, and some decisions, maybe it's better to wait till May 3rd, maybe it's not. So I think in the end, we just, we're trying to get through the next 2 weeks with the draft. Does that mean we won't sign anybody? No, it doesn't mean that. It means we're focused on the draft, but we could certainly sign a player. But again, we have to understand the rules, we have to understand where we stand, and what's the best way for us to build the team, quite honestly.
All right, we'll close it out with Ryan.
For the record, it's an old ratty sweatshirt. Nothing fancy over here. But question is for John and then Joe. John, have you had anybody on your staff put in a good word for Amari Rodgers? And then Joe, just your scouting report on Amari.
Right. Well, you're referring to the fact that Amari is T. Martin's son. So, of course, we've got a good character report. I think we know what he liked for breakfast growing up at some point in time. But he didn't need a good report. He stands on his own. He's got high grades from the coaches and the scouts, and he's definitely a player that we're talking about. So, Joe?
Yeah. The one person we didn't have evaluate officially, Amari, was his father. He knows him too well. So, but no, Amari is a really good player and has been his career there at Clemson. And on top of the player, I told T when we came back from the Senior Bowl, we had a chance to talk to Amari there. We talked to every player at the Senior Bowl, obviously. Just a great kid and highly competitive, versatile. Boy, at his pro day, he did running back drills, and he looked like a natural running back, which he was a running back in high school. But as a slot receiver, really physical, strong, knows how to get open, reliable player. Also has some return ability. So fun player to watch, and it's neat to have certainly a really close source to him on the staff.
Okay, guys, appreciate your time. To the media, thanks for your attendance, and we will see you back here next week for the draft. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.